Hello, everybody. This is Betsy Wurzel, host of Chatting with Betsy at Passion World Talk Radio. Jeannie White is the producer and writes the blogs, and I highly suggest you read the blog and share this post. I am also heard on Spreaker, Spotify, Apple, and Google. You would really benefit from subscribing to my show so you don't miss my show. I have a really special guest on today. I'm really excited. Caregivers, post and past, you need to get involved with research. Our stories help others for the future. And I'm proud to say I've been a part of research. I am not ashamed of my husband. I'm not ashamed of my story, and I will speak my truth to whoever wants to hear it. So with me today is a friend of mine who is a researcher, and I did talk to her last year about research, and she's going to talk about what she does and a very exciting upcoming event, which I'm going to be part of. And I want to welcome Shaikha Alothman to Chatting with Betsy. Hi, Shaikha.
Hi, Betsy. Thank you so much for having me. I'm extremely honored. Thank you so much for this nice introduction.
Well, you're welcome, and I'm honored that you are coming on. What research was it last year, Shaikha, that I was involved in that you had asked me to be part of?
The research was a part of a program called the MIT I-Corps program, obviously at MIT. And the purpose of the program, which I love, is that it is not pure research. It is not pure academic research. It is research that's somewhat academic in nature, but with the goal of creating something tangible in the industry very quick, faster than typical traditional academia. And the reason why I joined this program is exactly for that cause. So you propose the cause, whatever industry you're in, and I proposed the cause of family caregivers, because that was also a part of my work previously in public health. And so I was extremely excited to see that they accepted me, and they are a National Science Foundation program, so it is actually funded by the National Science Foundation. The research was basically looking at whatever the challenges are, the biggest challenges for family caregivers at large. So it's not exclusive to dementia and Alzheimer's, but naturally, as you know, Betsy, dementia takes a big cut of the family caregivers. You know, the chances are when you speak with a family caregiver are higher that they care for somebody with dementia or Alzheimer's. And so basically the research was looking at specifically the isolation and the loneliness and the stigma that faces family caregivers, which is what you opened this interview with. So thank you so much for bringing that up. And we realized that there's a lot of course, trouble that face family caregivers, but it is extremely common, even higher than we expected, that a family caregiver feels isolated, and they feel like suddenly their friends don't understand what they're going through. Sometimes their own family don't understand what they're going through. They feel unguided, even though people try to help them. And in the hospitals, the clinicians, the social workers, it is not enough. And so my research was basically trying to find a solution for exactly that.
That is so awesome. And I've said on my show, even with this pandemic, social isolation for caregiver, we could do that standing on our head. The world is now getting a taste of what caregivers have been facing for years on end, sometimes, depending on how long your loved one has their dementia or whatever illness. It doesn't even have to be a dementia. It could be something else. But, you know, as you know, caregivers, we can't just go out when we want to. We have to have a plan in place, someone to watch our loved one. So we just can't go out on a whim. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad that people like you, Shaikha, are doing research. And I really want to tell listeners, whatever your loved one's illness is, you know, dementia, cancer, whatever, please get involved in research that Shaikha's doing. I was involved in other research, and tell your story so people can learn from them. That is really honoring your loved one legacy. Sometimes, and we discussed this, Shaikha, that caregivers are reluctant to discuss their loved one's situation because they think they're bringing shame on them. No, you're not. You're honoring them. I'm honoring my husband by telling people about his illness and his journey. And I want people to learn from Matt's journey and from my experience. And if more caregivers would be involved, I think that then science or, whoever the powers that be would say, you know what? Yes, caregivers do suffer from social isolation and depression, and what can we do to help them? I mean, that's how I feel. I could get on my soapbox about that.
It's fantastic what you're saying. It's fantastic.
Thank you. Now, did your research come up with not a cure, but a solution? That's what I want to say. A solution?
Yes. So we identified that, again, a huge, the vast majority of family caregivers, especially with dementia, the questions come in three forms. First of all, once you get the diagnosis, once you realize that you're in the position, obviously you need guidance on which services are available for you. And there's a huge gap there. It's very funny because the services tend to come from different organizations, different sectors, different places. Not one person would know, even the social workers who are supposed to know. It's very difficult to keep up, right? And so that's one huge, it's a great deal. It's a big problem. When you're overwhelmed, when you just got the diagnosis, where do you begin? Is it, do I learn how to handle dementia at home with the person that I love? Do I learn what services are out there? So that's a huge deal. And so the second thing is, again, the knowing how to care for it, knowing what to expect, worrying about things, being curious, not knowing, what's coming your way, what is next, how fast is it going to happen, all these questions about the illness itself. And then the third is the legal things. Power of attorney, other things. What do I do? Who's the person who's going to take care of this? Where do I go? So these are the biggest chunks. And the funny, the interesting thing that we realized, my research involved both family caregivers, and then we also spoke with the social workers on the other side to just know how different the perspectives were. And what we found is the social workers, some of them, would have some information for these answers, but that would mostly be because they would hear from the experiences of family caregivers. So I told you this, Betsy, before when you say, I'm not an expert, and I say, no, you are an expert, because from the healthcare perspective, it is the family caregiver who's the expert. Clinicians, people studying in medicine, in medical schools, clinicians, the clinical space studies the actual anatomy of the disease, but they don't know. Nobody knows exactly because it's a new disease. And so who knows? What do you do when your mother stops eating, or when they throw a tantrum and they're being aggressive? The answer is, the very meticulous, practical, extremely practical tips and tricks and answers are things that lie with caregivers. Caregivers are the experts. And so that was the thing that just popped in our head, to our faces in our research. It's that the caregivers are the experts. And we saw the information, the useful, valuable information, flow from one caregiver to another. And that was the most practical thing.
Yes. Thank you for your compliment, Shaikha. Yes, the caregivers do know their loved ones. And I had said that to the social worker who was not such a nice person, the hospice social worker, did not believe me that Matt was having a headache and that he was severely agitated. And I told her that we're not taking this crap anymore. I am encouraging my people to stand up for themselves in a nice but firm way. We are in the trenches. You know your husband, you know your wife, you know your mother, your father, your child better than anybody. And that we're not taking the crap of not being listened to. We need to be listened to. And I'm so glad you brought that up, Shaikha, because that's really important for the physicians and the nurses and just, the persons on hospice or palliative care, that those team of people know and understand that the caregiver knows the loved one. So if we say something is wrong, we're not making it up. We're telling you the truth.
No.
So
yes.
thank you
and
for that.
Thank you for saying that too. And I always say, to family caregivers or even a person with dementia who's at the early stages and aware of what's happening to themselves, I always say, you know best. You trust your gut. You go with what you feel. Because again, going back to that, really nobody really knows what's happening except a family caregiver. That's very close to the situation. Nobody, that's who the expert is. Yes, thank you. And I want to add, I like some of the reports that I read about the healthcare system. They say that the family caregivers across the U.S. are like the invisible healthcare system. They're like a whole different layer behind the scenes, behind closed curtains, going on and on and on, providing this different level of care. And I love this analogy, and I think it is very, very true. Again, the caregiver is the expert, and yes, the caregivers are carrying on their own shoulders the weight of a full healthcare system.
Yes, definitely true. And I feel that caregivers should be paid without having to go bankrupt, without having to go on Medicaid, because, yes, you can be a paid caregiver, but you have to meet a certain financial situation. And I have known people who divorced their spouses, not because they didn't love them, but because they wanted to be paid as their caregiver and for their spouse to get the help that they need. And they still lived with their spouse, but on paper they were divorced so that they could get the help. And that's really a tragedy. I don't fault the person who does it. I can perfectly understand that, but it shouldn't have to come to that in America. That's another soapbox I could get on. Excuse me, that should not have to be. And, I feel that people shouldn't have to be bankrupt and lose their homes and everything to care for their loved ones, even to put them in a facility if they have to, that they have to go through their life savings that they work so hard for. And I'd like to know, Shaikha, how did you get involved in research? What made you go into that particular field?
That's a good question. I came across it from the nurse's perspective. As I said, I worked in healthcare, and somebody brought to my attention that nurses, are just basically, losing a lot of control. It's basically like a nursing association that brought it up to me. And we were looking at the problem just generally in the healthcare, in the health industry, and when you talk to family caregivers, you realize where the problem actually lies. You realize who's suffering the biggest, the most. This is not to, of course, discredit social workers. A lot of social workers who are trying their best are finding it daunting that the system is failing them. And so, of course, the social workers are not to blame. There's no one to blame, just the system that's not working for this problem. So it just went from one thing to another, and then, I'm a millennial, and we know this is a fact that millennials, there more and more millennials are becoming caregivers at even a younger age than the generation before them. And basically, I just became a caregiver in the middle of my research, which is very, it's a funny twist of events. And I have to say, as much as you try to do research and as much as you try to understand, so I do have the facts. I was doing the research, but it's a whole different experience when you're in the shoes of a caregiver. It's funny when you know the facts, and then when it happens to you, the facts click, they make sense. but it's like suddenly they came to life, and you just realize, okay, this is what that meant, and this is what this meant, and all these things that I've heard from family caregivers that I spoke with and I interviewed, and it just came to life. And it's a big role to play.
Yes, it is true, Shaikha, because unless something affects you as an individual, you're not going to care about, the research on a disease. You're not going to care about there's a cure or awareness. They're saying it like not in my backyard. I mean, honestly, if it wasn't for my husband, I would never have gotten into my car, never would have started to do videos, never would have raised awareness. Why should I? It wasn't in my, it didn't affect me. I mean, my mother-in-law had Alzheimer's, but there wasn't the media back then, the social media outlets back then, but I didn't feel a need to raise awareness. But when it became to my husband and early onset, and to dispel the myths that, it's not an old person's disease, it's not a normal part of aging, it made me mad. And it made me mad how the medical community treated us and dismissed us. So, and until, people get involved, and I really would like for anyone who's going to be a hospice member on a team or palliative care or work in the field of dementia, I would like for them as their training to be in someone's home or in a facility for a week and see what it's like and be in charge of that person's care. Especially during a full moon, because I do believe a full moon affects people. I've seen it. And then see how it is. And then they would believe the caregiver and how a person can change so quickly and so rapidly, with the sundowning and hallucinations. But unless you live it, it's true. And, I'm glad you said, Shaikha, that more millennials are becoming caregivers, and this radio station has a huge millennial audience. Refresh my memory. What age is a millennial person considered? What age is that?
Born in the 80s. Like 20, late 20s, early 30s, mid 30s.
Oh, okay. So my son is 36. He was born 1984. Right. He was a caregiver when we moved in with my mother-in-law, so he was 15 or just turned 16. And he, helped take care of Grandma, and then Josh was 25, I believe, when Matt was diagnosed, or 26, something like that. And, he was a caregiver at that age. And with the millennials, are they going to put their life on hold to care for their parents? Exactly. Are they going to, start going to college? Are they going to put off getting married or childbearing to take care of a parent? These are issues that are going to come up.
If I may, I also spoke with millennials in my research, and I'm a millennial, so these things click with me. People, exactly like you said, who put themselves on hold in terms of a career. Sometimes they have to stop working for a few years, and then come back to the workforce maybe like 10 years later after, the person has passed or somebody else takes over caring. And it's extremely difficult because still in the industry, having a gap in your resume is considered, what is this? It's not acceptable. It's a very big problem in getting accepted into new positions after this period. And I just encourage all the millennials, everyone out there who had to stop working for X number of years, to just insert caregiver as if it was, because it is. It is a full-time job. It is a proper full-time job. And so I think, from my opinion and from my research, from what I know, that's the least that we can do to try to push things forward. And I also am in touch with a recruiter. She has an agency, and she's also a caregiver. And she put the cause, in her work to try to convince companies to consider this, to see this, to open their eyes to this. And so, yes, having a gap in your resume because of caregiving is not something to be, to be ashamed of, to put you down, to think that you are less than other people for this job application. And the second thing is dating. A lot of caregivers, again, who are millennials, like you said, they're in that age group. And this is the time for people to settle, to get, to have children and to date and to meet other people. And, I just want everyone to know that this is common and this is normal. And what matters the most, I think, is when a person takes the role of caregiving, they should be conscious of this. I think it's not good when a person thinks that caregiving happened to them. When a person, it's easy, as you know, in families, sometimes things just happen organically, and the person just ends up being a caregiver just because, it just happened organically. And I just encourage everyone to take on the role consciously and to realize that no matter what, it always must be a choice. It must be a choice.
Yes, and it's a choice not to be taken lightly. And now there are caregiver classes, and I recommend to anyone considering being a caregiver to check into that to see if you really have what it takes and you want to be a caregiver, because you don't know what it's like until you are in that role. And it's really difficult. It's rewarding, but it's difficult. And I think more millennials are caregivers now with this COVID pandemic. Their parents became sick, and they found themselves caregivers with that. Shaikha, could you please tell us about the event that's coming up, your caregivers?
Of course, I'm sure.
I'm so excited about that because I'm going to be on it.
I'm extremely excited about you being a part of it. So it is called Caregivers Mingle, and it is scheduled for August the 4th. So that's less than 2 weeks, one and a half weeks almost. And it's going to be at 3 p.m. at Easter time. And the concept is, to encourage family caregivers to, and I put it quote unquote, to find each other. So like we said, Betsy, support groups might not be the most practical thing for family caregivers. I'm talking about before COVID, for them to leave the house, to commit to a specific time when you have someone at home, where you don't know, you cannot predict your schedule. And so this is something that I've been, fiddling with for some time. I always wanted to make this happen for some time. And like you said, now with the pandemic, everyone has gone online. And so video chatting has become a lot more acceptable. It's basically being the most, used way of communicating with other people, to seeing the world. And so Caregivers Mingle it's like a speed dating event. It's got a fun twist to it. It's like you log in. You don't even log in. You just join the group, and you don't need to install anything. It's very easy. We made it easy, very user friendly. And all you do is click a link, and you're matched with someone random who is another caregiver, and you get a prompt. You get a question. For example, what is the funniest thing that you did this week? Or sometimes it's the questions about caregiving as well. So how did you start being a caregiver? What was the story? Or is caregiving what you expected it to be? Or what do you do when there's aggression, for example? Or is aggression a part of your caregiving? Or how does music help you in caregiving? So questions like that are supposed to, bring people together and share experiences. And so once you get matched with a person, you answer that question, and then the other person answers that question, and then once the 2 minutes pass, you can either, extend the conversation if you want to talk more, or you can meet someone else. So it's an idea to get everyone out of, to break the isolation, to break the feeling of loneliness that a lot of us are feeling right now in this difficult time. And I hope, my hope is that, people find solace and support and more information and just enjoy their time by meeting other people. And then, as you said, there are, we decided, because this is the first time we're going to run this, so it's a new thing, we decided to include experts, and I do consider you an expert, like I said. So you are going to be there. We have people. It's a global event, so we have people from California, from New England. We have people in London, and we have experts, people who are researchers about, for example, underprivileged and underrepresented minorities and how they deal with dementia. We have comedians who are also caregivers. So we have a mixture of demographic. And again, the point is to just bring up that conversation about caregiving, reflect on ourselves, just try to learn about each other and about ourselves and about our journeys in caregiving, and to have a good time, to have fun.
That sounds so awesome. It's a social mixer then for caregivers.
Exactly.
That's what it is. Mm-hmm. Oh, that sounds awesome. Now, how do people? It will be in the blog, but for people that are listening, how do they join that?
All you need to do is go to Caregiversmingle.club, and you're there. It's a web application, and so you don't need to install anything. You just go there, and then there's a button that that says join. You just join, and you're in.
Wow, I would definitely recommend that. What time is it going to be on Eastern Standard Time? Because we're in all time zones here.
I know. Sometimes you go
all different time zones.
I mean, my head's been spinning trying to convert time zones. It's going to be at 2 p.m. I'm glad somebody understands. So it's going to be at 3 p.m. Eastern Time.
Okay, so it's 3 p.m. Eastern Time. I have to go on Google, and I have to ask Google, what time is it in Texas? What time is it in Greece? Because I talk to people that are in all time zones. I can't remember. Everybody's time zone. So I have to Google it. So is it on the 3rd or the 4th, Shaikha?
It's on the 4th. That's going to be a Tuesday.
A 4th, okay. I don't know why I was thinking it was the 3rd. So it's August 4th, Tuesday, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This is going to be in the blog, which is why it's very important for everyone listening to read the blog and share it. And I would highly recommend joining, not just because Shaikha and I are on there, but it's a good way to meet people and share your experiences, because this is how we all learn. And, and researchers learn from people who have shared experiences, who share their experiences. And I just think that sometimes I think, Shaikha, the people are afraid to get involved with research. Maybe they're afraid to speak to somebody, a stranger. They're afraid that information might be, leaked somewhere. But your research that you have done, that is confidential.
Of course.
Is that?
Of course.
Yeah.
And
so.
Of course. Yeah.
Mhm.
And the records.
I think.
Go ahead. I just want to add, if I may, the great majority of the research, the records are destroyed after the information is analyzed in X months of time, after 6 months or whatever time the researcher needs to analyze the information. The records are later destroyed. And so confidentiality is treated extremely, seriously in research, definitely.
Yes, and I think people need to be reassured of that, that it's not going to be used against them or leaked out to, an insurance company or, who knows what people think. I personally am very honored, and I be part of this Caregiver Social Mixer. I am honored to be part of any research because if I can help somebody by sharing Matt's story, I am honoring him, and that's how I look at it. I mean, to each his own, but that's how I look at it because Matt loves to help people, and I would just continuing on what he would do. I mean, sometimes he would say, "Stop talking about me." He was talking about him. He would get mad, but then he would say, "Betsy, you know, you're doing a good thing. I'm proud of you." And that's what he would say. But, you know, I just want to tell caregivers, because some people think they're dishonoring their loved one by talking about them. No, you're not. I don't see it that way. You're not dishonoring your loved one. You are actually helping someone else. You're honoring them. I mean, that's how I feel about it. And I could say that because I did lose my husband, and I know that I am honoring him. I don't feel like I'm dishonoring Matt at all by sharing his story with the research study, with the researcher. Not at all. I'm very flattered to be asked, and I want to help people. And it does, you know, trickle down because what you all did, you share it with other people, then eventually I guess it gets down to doctors, and they read the research.
Exactly. And it's not even you know, it's not even, you know, even like you know, as a researcher, you get to have all this information. And so you get to share it in conferences, you get to share it in roundtables. You feed that information, you feed those needs into the healthcare system, the conversations, basically. So it is exactly that. It is basically giving caregiving a voice in the conversation of healthcare systems. Definitely. And as much as, you know, Betsy, you are in the middle of this, I'm in the middle of this, as much as we think, you know, because we're down into it and we're in the middle of it, you think that, you know, wow, how could people not even know that this is a problem? But once you get out of this bubble, you realize there's a lot of people who don't know that this thing exists, that this problem exists. It's very funny how, you know, bipolar this is. But, yeah, there are policymakers who are thinking about setting the next, you know, the future policies. People are, you know, who are employers, who are setting their internal company policies, and they don't know about this. And if they knew, things would change. So, yes, definitely having a voice is the way to go for family caregivers. I agree.
Yes, it's very important to have a voice, and you don't have to be an expert on public speaking. Okay, you could, you know, they're not asking you to be perfect speakers. And I heard someone on TED Talks the other day, and I want to share this with the audience. And the person said, when you withhold your information, when you won't speak out because you're afraid of public speaking, you are withholding a gift from somebody that could help somebody. So it doesn't matter how you speak publicly, just share your information to help someone else. Right. And I thought that was awesome because sometimes I think, what am I doing talking on the radio? I'm not, you know, a polished, perfect host or speaker. I mean, but I'm sharing my truth and other people's experiences. And I want to thank Lillian Caldwell, Jeannie White, and Passion World Talk Radio for the opportunity for people like me to have people like you on, Shaikha, and others to share, and we learn and we grow from each other. So I want to thank you so much for thank you for having you on. Is there any way people can connect with you, Shaikha, through social media? Anything else you'd like to add about yourself?
Of course. So I am on Twitter, Shaikha Alothman. I have a very difficult name to spell, I know, and so maybe it's better to find my name on the blog. And I'm also on Facebook, also Shaikha Alothman, my full name, basically.
Okay. Thank you so much, Shaikha. Appreciate you coming on. I appreciate what you and the other researchers are doing. And I just want to add this, and maybe this is how it's helping the research. I'm going to say, I lose track of time, 3 years ago, Matt's primary doctor started to pre-screen for Alzheimer's with the clock. So they're starting to pre-screen. I wish they would have pre-screened a lot earlier. My neurologist, his wife is a geriatric psychiatrist, very involved in Alzheimer's and other dementias. And the doctor told me that his wife is now focusing on the caregiver and how is the caregiver feeling and what is the caregiver going through more than the patient. So things are slowly changing. I mean, I've been involved with Alzheimer's for, it was just so sad, 20 years. So it's slowly changing, slowly. And my dad also had dementia, but I didn't take care of him, but I, supported my mom through it.
Yeah.
But it's slowly changing. And that's why listeners get involved with research. Get involved if someone, make sure it's legit. Always make sure that it's a legitimate, research. Google them. That's all. And I just think it's great to do that. There's also, clinical trials as far as like the medical aspect of it. That's an individual choice. But with research, talking to somebody is not involving, medications or anything. I think it's just an awesome way to help the human race, actually. And it's very, uplifting, for me anyway, to do that. I mean, I felt like I was helping someone. And you don't know, the ripples.
Yeah.
No, go ahead, Shaikha.
I just want to say, my personal dream is that this problem is not going to be passed down from the millennial generation to the next generation. I think, I'm very hopeful that the healthcare system is going to accommodate for family caregiving and that society at large, like we said, policies need to change. This is not about only the healthcare system. But I'm very optimistic and hopeful that this problem is not going to be passed down from our generation to the next. And that will be with our efforts, like you're saying, Betsy, by speaking about it, by not stigmatizing it anymore, by accepting it as it is, by being more aware, by sharing information. And I call me crazy, but I think that is actually possible for this generation.
Yes, I agree. And I sure hope that there will be a cure for the millennial generation and going forward. I mean, I would like to see it in my lifetime, but I don't think that's going to happen. But I sure hope for my son's generation and going forward that there will be a cure. But in the meantime, speak up, caregivers, and do your part to, raise awareness and help research, which then trickles down to your local doctor and your social worker and, other medical professionals so that they know what you are going through and experiencing. And I want to thank you again, Shaikha, for coming on. I appreciate you coming on and your time and all that you do. I want to thank the listeners for listening. And please, it is free to subscribe to Chatting with Betsy on Spreaker, Spotify, Google, CastBox, Podchaser. Appreciate everyone's support. Appreciate people listening. Please share this podcast and the blog. And you never know who you are helping by sharing and also listening. So stay tuned to my shows because you never know who's going to come on. As a matter of fact, in August, I'm going to have another person who did research that I was involved in. It was about being a spouse or a partner, and that was interesting. So you're going to want to stay tuned, folks, to Chatting with Betsy. I want to thank Jeannie White and just thank you, everyone, really, for your support. I love doing this show, and it's a passion, and I'm very passionate about helping people. If there's any topics you would like for me to discuss, just send an email in, and you can contact me on my own Facebook page, Betsy Wurzel, Wurzel. I have a support group, #Kick Alzheimer's Ask Movement. If you want to be inspired, educated, learn how to be an advocate, come join my group. You don't have to have dementia. You can have, or you could have it. It doesn't matter. I accept people from all walks of life, and you don't even have to be a caregiver. I have people in my group that are not even caregivers. They just want to be educated and help support caregivers. So with that, I want to say be kind and be safe until we chat again. Be blessed. Bye-bye, everybody.